Marina stood frozen in her son's dining room, replaying Sienna's dramatic outburst in her mind. She had arrived that Saturday evening hoping for a peaceful family dinner, but peace was the last thing she received. Sienna sat on her expensive white sofa, wearing a glittering dress and an artificial smile she reserved only for Caleb's presence. The moment he looked away, the smile disappeared like it had never existed. Dinner had barely begun when the familiar tension filled the air. Sienna chatting endlessly about her wealthy friends, her lavish trips, and the diamond necklace Caleb bought for $8,000. Sienna repeated the price 3 times, her voice dripping with pride, almost as if she needed Marina to memorize the cost. Marina ate quietly, pretending not to notice the deliberate flaunting. She smiled when required and nodded when expected, doing everything possible to avoid conflict. But with Sienna, conflict needed no invitation. It always arrived on schedule. "Marina, you passed the salt without me asking for it," Sienna snapped, her tone sharp as glass. Marina had simply moved the shaker closer after noticing Sienna reaching for it. A small gesture, a normal courtesy. Yet Sienna twisted it into an insult. "Sorry, I was only trying to help," Marina replied softly, using the patience she had built over 3 years of Sienna's quiet contempt. But Sienna was already preparing her scene. "You always interfere," she cried loudly. "You never let me breathe. You're always hovering over me like I'm a child." Fake tears gathered in her eyes almost instantly. Caleb paused with his fork midair, his expression darkening in a way Marina had never seen. He stared at her not like his mother, but like a stranger guilty of an unforgivable offense. "Honey, what happened?" Caleb asked Sienna gently, using the same tone he once used to comfort Marina when he was a little boy. Now that tenderness belonged completely to his wife. "Your mother keeps disrespecting me," Sienna sobbed, dabbing her eyes. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine when she makes me feel unwanted in my own home." The entire performance unfolded with perfect timing. Marina sat frozen at the table, watching helplessly as her son swallowed every lie Sienna fed him. She tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come out. "Mom, I need you to leave," Caleb said sharply, like a boss firing an incompetent employee. Marina stood, her legs trembling. She picked up her purse with shaking hands, her heart pounding painfully. "Caleb, I only wanted to help. I didn't mean to upset Sienna," she whispered. But Caleb wasn't listening. He held Sienna in his arms, murmuring comfort into her hair while she pretended to cry harder. Marina walked to the door unnoticed, unseen, unacknowledged. Her son didn't even glance her way as she left the room. The cold night air slapped Marina's cheeks as she opened the door. She was about to step outside when Caleb's voice rang out behind her. Firm, final, merciless. "Mom, this can't continue. You're always interfering. You make Sienna uncomfortable. You need to apologize to her next Saturday. In front of our guests. Either you apologize or you don't come back." Marina turned slowly. The boy she had raised alone, the boy she fed, clothed and protected, now looked at her as if she were a problem he needed to eliminate. Before she could say a word, Sienna appeared behind him. Her tears were gone. In their place was a small victorious smile. Barely there, but Marina saw it clearly. A smile that said, "I won." Marina nodded, not in agreement, but because a decision formed quietly inside her. If they wanted an apology, she would give one. But not the kind they imagined. She would go to that dinner. She would stand before their wealthy friends. And she would speak the truth Sienna never thought she'd dare reveal. The truth that would destroy Sienna's perfect facade. "All right, Caleb," Marina said calmly. "I'll be there. I'll apologize." Her voice was so steady that she saw confusion flicker in Caleb's eyes. But it was too late. The trap had already been set, one Sienna didn't even know she walked into. Marina left the house with her back straight, saving her tears for the silence of her apartment. As she walked down the empty street toward the bus stop, the cold wind barely registered. Her mind was already gathering the pieces she had ignored for years, pieces that pointed to one truth. Sienna had secrets. On the bus ride home, Marina stared out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of gold. She was 67, exhausted, heartbroken but strangely awake. A new feeling rose inside her, one she hadn't tasted in a very long time. Determination. Saturday would not be the day Marina begged for forgiveness from a manipulative woman and her blind son. It would be the day truth walked into their perfect house and shattered everything they believed was untouchable. When Marina entered her small apartment, she closed the door gently and stood in the darkness. And for the first time in years she smiled, not with joy but with cold understanding. She finally had a purpose again. She finally had a plan. She remembered the years when Caleb adored her, when their bond was unbreakable. Those memories flooded back, the sleepless nights she worked to feed him, the cheap clothes she bought so he could attend a better school, the dreams he shared with her every night. Somewhere along the way, she had lost her son. But not forever. Caleb was born on a rainy March morning. Marina remembered arriving at the hospital alone. His father had left 2 months earlier, claiming he wasn't ready for fatherhood. But when Caleb opened his small dark eyes and looked at her for the first time, Marina knew she would never need anyone else. Those early years were brutal. She worked 2 jobs, barely slept, and lived on cheap meals. But whenever she saw Caleb's smile, all the exhaustion faded. Everything she did for him. Every sacrifice was worth it. Caleb grew into a brilliant child. He learned to read early and constantly brought home perfect grades. His teachers praised him, telling Marina he would achieve great things. When he won a school math contest at 8, he ran home with his certificate waving in his hands. "Mom, I won!" he shouted, beaming. Marina hugged him so tightly he laughed. That night, she cooked his favorite spaghetti and they ate on the living room floor because they still couldn't afford a table. They laughed, talked, and dreamed together, just the 2 of them against the world. Marina worked herself to exhaustion, saving every penny for Caleb's education. She scrubbed offices late at night, washed laundry during the day, and ignored the pain in her back. Caleb was her purpose, her reason. During his teenage years, their bond only grew stronger. He trusted her completely, sharing crushes, fears, and insecurities. "Mom, you're the strongest person I know," he told her at 15. Marina always reassured him they didn't need wealth. They had love. And for many years he believed her. They were a team. Unbreakable. Until Sienna arrived. Caleb earned a scholarship to university. Marina cried the day the acceptance letter arrived. Tears of relief, pride, and triumph. Caleb hugged her and whispered, "We did it, Mom." He studied civil engineering, graduated with honors, and got a high-paying job. He took Marina to a fancy restaurant with his first paycheck, spending more money than she was comfortable with. But he was proud to finally spoil the mother who sacrificed everything for him. "I'll never forget what you did for me," he promised. Marina never imagined those would be the last honest words he'd say before everything changed. 4 years after college, Caleb visited Marina every Sunday. They shared meals, stories, and laughter. He helped her with rent when she struggled and bought her a new fridge when hers broke. "One day when I have my own house, you'll live with me," he said often. "You'll never have to worry again." Marina believed him. Course she did. He was the son she had devoted her entire life to. But then Sienna came. Pretty, polished, wealthy. And everything shifted faster than Marina could understand. Caleb introduced Sienna to Marina 3 months into their relationship. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special," he said, beaming. Sienna walked into Marina's small apartment wearing designer clothes, expensive heels, and a perfume that smelled like money. Her polite smile vanished the moment Caleb looked away. Marina offered coffee and store-bought cookies, trying her best to make Sienna comfortable. But Sienna answered in short, cold sentences, glancing at her watch repeatedly. Caleb, completely enamored, didn't notice. Marina saw the truth immediately. Sienna judged everything about her within seconds. After that visit, things began to change. Slowly at first. Caleb started canceling their Sunday meetings. Dinner with Sienna's parents. A work event. A social function. Always something more important than their tradition. Calls grew shorter. Visits became rare. And when he did come, he seemed distracted, more concerned about Sienna's texts than Marina's presence. Marina told herself it was a phase. But deep inside she sensed the distance growing. Sienna entered Caleb's life like a quiet storm, gentle at first, then destructive. Caleb visited Marina with less warmth, less patience. He spoke differently, dressed differently, even looked at her differently, as though ashamed of the life he came from. Marina prayed it would pass. She prayed her son would remember the woman who raised him alone. But the change only deepened. And then came the announcement. "Mom, Sienna and I are getting married," Caleb said excitedly. Marina forced a smile while a knot formed in her chest. She hugged him, said all the right words, and hid her fear. The wedding was extravagant beyond anything Marina had seen. A luxurious ballroom, flowers imported from overseas, a towering 5-tier cake, and guests dressed in clothes worth more than Marina's yearly income. She arrived in her simple discounted dress, her 2-year-old shoes, and her neatly done hair. The stares were subtle but cruel. She didn't belong and everyone knew it. Sienna's parents greeted her coldly. Marina sat alone in the front row with no family of her own to fill the seats beside her. She watched Caleb pledge his life to a woman she barely knew and felt herself fading. At the reception, Marina was seated far from the head table, surrounded by strangers. Caleb approached her briefly. "Mom, you look beautiful," he said with a smile she knew was polite, not sincere. Still she accepted it. She danced one slow song with him, holding back tears and silently begging God not to let her son drift away. But deep down, she knew this wedding marked the beginning of the end. The moment Sienna would become the center of his world and Marina would slowly be pushed out of it. After the wedding, Caleb and Sienna moved into a huge house she had chosen, one Marina could barely afford to visit. A week later, Marina brought them a simple but beautiful set of dishes as a housewarming gift. Sienna opened the box, examined the plates, flipped them over to check the brand, and forced a smile. "Oh, lovely, Marina. We'll use these when we eat something simple," she said. She placed the box aside like unwanted clutter. Caleb didn't defend his mother or correct Sienna's rudeness. He simply looked away, ashamed. Marina realized then that Sienna held all the power now. Every month, Caleb drifted further. His calls became fewer. His visits almost non-existent. When Marina did visit, Sienna controlled every conversation. She interrupted Marina often, corrected harmless comments, and made subtle digs at her. "Caleb, your mother said you put the tomatoes in first. Everyone knows they go in last," she would say with a laugh. Caleb always agreed, always siding with Sienna. The girl Marina raised with love and sacrifice watched silently while another woman belittled her. Marina felt herself shrinking, becoming a stranger in her own son's life. One day, desperate for a glimpse of her son, Marina visited their home without calling. Sienna answered the door with clear irritation. "We weren't expecting you," she said coldly. Marina stood on the porch like an unwanted guest. "I just wanted to see Caleb." "It's been 3 weeks," Marina whispered. "He's working. Important meeting. He can't be interrupted." Sienna began closing the door. Marina placed her foot in the way. Pathetic, desperate, but necessary. "Please, just a moment." Sienna sighed. "Wait here." She didn't even invite Marina inside. Marina waited 15 long minutes on the porch while neighbors walked by, glancing at her like she was begging. Finally, Caleb came out, still holding his phone. "Mom, you can't just show up like this," he said sharply. "I'm working." He didn't hug her, didn't smile, didn't even step closer. "Honey, I only wanted to see you," Marina replied gently. When she reached to touch his arm, he moved away. The rejection felt like a slap across her soul. "I'll call you later," he said, and closed the door before she could answer. That night, Marina cried harder than she had in decades. She cried on the bus home, in her tiny apartment, into her pillow until tears refused to fall anymore. She realized Sienna hadn't only married Caleb, she had conquered him. She had turned him into someone Marina no longer recognized. Someone capable of shutting the door in his mother's face. In the months that followed, the pain deepened. Caleb rarely called. When Marina finally got him to visit, he sat stiffly, like being there was a chore. "Mom, you're too intense. Sienna says you overreact," he said carelessly. That sentence broke Marina. "Sienna said that?" she asked quietly. Caleb didn't answer. His silence was confirmation. Marina realized Sienna was poisoning him slowly, cleverly, with words that sounded like concern but carried venom. She tried to express her feelings. "Caleb, I feel like I'm losing you," she whispered. "We barely talk. We barely see each other." But Caleb only sighed loudly. "Mom, people grow up. I can't be your little boy forever. I have responsibilities now." His voice was cold, distant. Marina felt something inside her cracking slowly, painfully. Eventually Marina stopped calling so much. Each rejection hurt more than the last. The silence between them stretched like a canyon. One night she sent a small message. "Caleb, I miss you. Can we see each other?" Hours passed. No response. Days passed. Still nothing. Finally he replied, "Maybe next month. I'm busy." Next month. As if seeing his mother was a chore he could postpone indefinitely. Marina found comfort only in her friend Ruth, who understood the pain of children forgetting the hands that raised them. But nothing filled the emptiness Caleb left. When Marina was finally invited again months later, she noticed something disturbing. Every photograph of Caleb as a child had disappeared. The baby photos, graduation pictures, the framed pictures of their life together. All gone. Only photos of Caleb and Sienna remained: vacations, fancy dinners, extravagant events. "Where are the old photos?" Marina asked. "We put them in storage," Caleb said casually. "Sienna redecorated." He didn't even look at her as he spoke. Marina felt like her entire existence had been erased from her son's life. Intentionally, strategically. The humiliation continued. Sienna would smile sweetly while making cutting remarks. "Marina, you look tired. Are you sleeping well? At your age, it's important to rest," she'd say in a sugary voice. Caleb never defended her. Sometimes he even laughed. Sienna compared herself to Marina often. "My mother just returned from Europe. Have you traveled, Marina?" She knew Marina had never left the country, barely afforded rent. But she needed Marina to feel small, to understand she didn't belong in their world. Marina endured it all silently. Until one afternoon changed everything. Marina was at the bank depositing her Social Security check when she saw Sienna exiting a fancy downtown cafe with a well-dressed man. She hid behind a post, not wanting to be noticed. The conversation between Sienna and the man seemed intense, too intimate. The man handed Sienna a folder. She opened it, reviewed documents, then gave him a thick envelope. Before handing it over, she glanced around nervously, as if she didn't want anyone to see. Marina's stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. Sienna's polished world suddenly looked suspicious. That night Marina couldn't sleep. She replayed the scene 100 times. The folder, the envelope, Sienna's sharp movements. Something told her this was important. Something told her Sienna was hiding more than bad manners and manipulation. Marina called her friend Ruth the next day. "I think Sienna is into something illegal," she confessed. Ruth listened silently before warning. "Be careful, Marina. This could be dangerous." But Marina had already made up her mind. She was done being silent. She needed answers. Ruth connected Marina with her nephew, Dylan, a private investigator who usually handled small cases. Marina met him at a cafe far from Caleb's neighborhood. She explained everything: Sienna's behavior, the mysterious man, the envelope, the years of growing hostility. Dylan listened carefully. Investigations take time and money, he said. I'll need at least $1,000 to start. That was almost all Marina had saved for emergencies. But losing her son completely was the greatest emergency of her life. She gave Dylan every penny. The 2 weeks that followed were torture. Marina woke up every day wondering if she had made a mistake. Wondering if she was becoming exactly what Sienna accused her of, a meddling mother who couldn't let go. But deep down, she knew something darker was happening. Something intentional. When Dylan finally called, his voice was serious. Marina, we need to meet. They met that same night. He slid a thick folder toward her. What I found is serious. Very serious. Your son is being manipulated. Financially and emotionally. Dylan opened the folder and showed Marina documents revealing that Caleb had given Sienna access to all his savings. Over $120,000. She had convinced him to invest it in a fund she managed. But the money had been transferred into accounts under her name only. If they divorced today, Caleb would get nothing, Dylan said. Marina felt the room spinning. Her son, her brilliant, hard-working son, had been robbed by the woman he loved. And he didn't even know it. Dylan continued. There's more. He showed screenshots of messages between Sienna and her mother. Conversations where Marina was called the obstacle, the old lady, the problem. Messages where Sienna bragged about manipulating Caleb emotionally. I'm pushing him away from the mother, one message read. When he finally chooses, it will be me. Marina's hands trembled as she read. The cruelty, the calculation, the coldness, it was all there in black and white. Every humiliation Sienna had inflicted had been part of a deliberate plan. Dylan revealed the final blow. Sienna's family wasn't wealthy. They were drowning in debt. Over $500,000. The mansion, the trips, the luxury lifestyle. All funded with loans and Caleb's hard-earned money. Sienna had married him not for love, but for financial survival. Marina felt physically sick. But Dylan wasn't finished. She's planning something worse, he said. She's pushing Caleb to buy an $800,000 house next week. She plans to forge documents so the house becomes hers if they divorce. Marina's breath caught. That's fraud. Yes, Dylan said. But if Caleb signs willingly, she wins. He'll be tied to her financially for decades. Marina realized time was running out. She couldn't confront Caleb privately. Sienna had poisoned him too deeply. If Marina came alone with accusations, he'd accuse her of jealousy again. You get one chance, Dylan warned. If you reveal this the wrong way, Caleb will never believe you. Marina knew he was right. She needed witnesses. She needed a moment Sienna couldn't escape. Then she remembered the upcoming dinner, the one where she was supposed to apologize publicly to Sienna. That was it. That was the moment. In front of guests, in front of witnesses, with undeniable proof. Marina looked Dylan in the eye. Come to that dinner. Bring everything. He nodded. I'll be there. Marina spent the next several days preparing mentally. She rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd say it, how she'd stand. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't tremble. She would be steady, calm, and unshakable. Saturday arrived. Marina dressed in a simple but elegant gray dress. She fixed her hair, applied soft makeup, and looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in months, she recognized the woman staring back. Strong, determined, no longer begging for scraps of love. She arrived exactly at 8 p.m. Sienna opened the door, smiling like a polished actress. Marina, so glad you could come. Her voice dripped with sweet poison. Marina stepped in, her heart steady. The house was full of wealthy guests, all unaware of the storm about to hit. At 8:20, Sienna tapped her glass, signaling silence. We invited you all here tonight for something special, she announced proudly. Marina, Caleb's mother, has something she wants to say to us. Every eye turned to Marina, expecting humiliation. Marina stood slowly, set down her glass, and walked to the center of the room. Her voice was calm. You're right, Sienna. I do have something to say. But not what you expect. That exact moment the doorbell rang. Dylan had arrived right on time. The truth was finally ready to erupt.